That's also something back to sleeper that I learned from them. I'm like, man, like these guys and gals, they're waking up every single morning and they're putting in the work, and I watch them do it for 3, 4 years straight. And that's what it takes. And I think that that psychological resilience and that consistency is just such an underrated part of the journey of building something, right?
Hey, this is Jesse here, and you're about to hear my discussion with Brian from Griddy, which turns the fantasy football draft into an addictive strategic puzzle that you can play in just minutes a day. In this one, Brian explains how Griddy's fantasy football game overcomes the seasonality constraints of traditional fantasy football, why he designed Griddy to be a casual mobile game without any real money component, acquiring the first 30,000 users through organic marketing channels, and how his experience leading product at Sleeper helped him prepare for the entrepreneurial journey. Brian's passion for Griddy is palpable in this discussion, and I know you'll enjoy this one as much as I did. The Betting Startups podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 4 out of the top 5 US operators personalize player experiences with Optimove. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/bettingstartups. And if you like what you see, you'll get your first month free. All right, we are back here on the Betting Startups podcast and really excited to welcome today's guest. I have Brian from Griddy joining me. Griddy, not to be confused with the Philadelphia Flyers mascot, spelled differently, though pronounced the same. Brian, good morning, man. How you doing today?
Doing great, Jesse. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, Brian. Look, you come from a background building products in the real money gaming space, and Griddy is your own venture now, going out on your own, and I'm excited to unpack everything you're doing because you're doing some pretty unique stuff. But before we get into everything Griddy, Brian, let's just start at the top here. Tell the audience a bit about yourself, who you are, your background, and a little bit of a sense of the major chapters of your journey before starting Griddy.
Yeah, the entire journey going up to Griddy, I mean, it all starts with that internal passion as a sports fan from a very, very young age, really just always been absolutely enamored with football, basketball, baseball, just, everything under the sports umbrella. Diehard Bills fan, so shout out to my 4-0 Buffalo Bills. This is the year, hopefully. We'll see. But beyond that fandom, I mean, I've really always just been fascinated by the intersection of sports and data and business, just really a lot of different ways to quantify and compete. And that's been the foundation for so much of my life. I mean, it's gone back to as early as elementary school, believe it or not. Like I was that kind of weird kid that was like commissioning fantasy football leagues for Yahoo Public Leagues that I'm sure were filled with adults who did not know that a fifth grader was the one pulling the strings. Organizing like school-wide basketball tournaments at recess, arbitraging sports cards across eBay and sports card forums and selling them in class. I mean, it's just always been these sort of ventures at really every step of my life. And if you look back at it all in a holistic picture, it probably shouldn't be too surprising that I ended up doing it as a career and for a living, which, my mom is still shocked by. She can't believe that I actually built a career out of my love of football and fantasy football. And really beyond that, like when I look at like the impact that sports have had in my life or like the role that it has played, going all the way back to elementary school, it's been the foundation for so many of the most important relationships in my life. It's always been those football Sundays that have brought my family together, that have kept me in touch with great friends from high school and college and old jobs. It's what keeps the group chats going. And so like, it's that form of bonding that brings us together that I think makes sports so important and so meaningful to a lot of us beyond just watching the games themselves. It's really the relationships you build around them. And, that feeling of being in a stadium with 70,000 strangers that you'll know nothing about, but you're high-fiving and cheering with. And so for me, like that's always been the magic of sports. That's been, something really special and why I feel so grateful to be working in the space that so many people really are that passionate about. Like that's a very special thing in today's world. And so that really is like the fire that gets me out of bed every morning and makes me so grateful to be doing this.
Well, as you say, Brian, with that background and that history, maybe not surprising that you're working in and around sports. Talk, though, a bit about the origins of Griddy and specifically what prompted you to say, you know what, now's the time in my life to start a company. I have this idea, I have this concept. Just talk about the origin story and that whole, making that leap into entrepreneurship for you.
Yeah, so I came over from Sleeper, which I'm sure most people that are watching or listening to this will know pretty well. A big player in the fantasy sports space amongst many other of the sports verticals. And with my time in sports, both on the business side as sleeper and then just as a user, as a super fan, I identified a couple of issues that were really impacting both sides of the equation. And that's seasonality, right? When you look at it from the business perspective, you're seeing, massive drop-offs in engagement and activity during 8 months of the year where there's not football games on. From the user side, you love it so much, you care about it so much. It really just it sucks when there's so much of the year where there's really not much to do. And obviously there are some things you can do. We've got the best ball bros out there. We've got all sorts of training camp articles, draft analysis. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for a way to consistently engage with that team or that sport that you love, there just historically hasn't been an outlet for that. And so much of the drive for me was identifying that and saying like, hey, what I really want to do is I want to build something for people like me and my friends who really love it that much to wake up and look forward to playing every single morning. And so, really that consistent availability and accessibility was the drive for me to create Griddy and build a game that people can play 365 days a year instead of just, the Sundays in the fall or for Thursday nights.
Well, let's double click on that, Brian. As you just alluded to, you're solving what is, I think, one of the foundational problems for anybody building products in and around sports, which is that seasonality factor, right? I mean, we've all just emerged from the summer lull here. There wasn't much going on, and you're attacking that problem head on with the Griddy concept. So to tee it up for you, why don't you give the audience just a high concept overview, a bit of an elevator pitch on what is Griddy, who's it for, and ultimately what's the value proposition of it?
Yeah, Griddy fantasy football puzzles, which if you haven't heard of it before, that's because it is basically a made up term that we created. It is a 9 round draft, really casual mobile game, really focused on strategy and accessibility. Your goal is to build the highest graded team possible. And the results of your drafts are actually not based on any real life stats or any games, which is what unlocks that accessibility. You get 9 rounds. Each round, you get dealt 3 randomly generated player cards. And your objective is to match up those player cards on a Griddy. You're playing on the grid and you're trying to match up players based on paired characteristics. And so that's players from the same team, players from the same division, and players from the same draft class. And this 9 card grid is connected by all of these lines, and it very much turns into a puzzle where you're trying to move your player cards, your guys around to try and figure out like, hey, how do I build the best team? How do I maximize my score? And we have a lot of different outlets for these types of drafts. You can play against friends. We have like a ranked solo mode. We have, leagues. We have achievements, statistics. And it really is made with the objective to give people like, hey, here's this 2 minute game that I can pick up and play any time of the year, whether it is, with your morning cup of coffee or on the toilet or a little break from work. It's just, hey, any time of the day I can pick up and play this game that is fun and strategic. And because the cards are randomly generated, it's going to be different every single time. A lot of our users have done thousands and thousands of drafts, and they're never going to see the same 2 drafts and the same 2 teams. And I think that's the variability that keeps people coming back. It makes it so engaging and fun and, quite frankly, just addicting.
So I played around with the product a little bit in anticipation of this, Brian, and there's this concept in the app of chemistry, right? And to your point, the player cards that you're assigned, you're looking to combine them to maximize this concept of chemistry. Can you just talk a little bit about that and sort of for you as a product builder, kind of how you came up with this concept? How do you sort of define this concept of chemistry? And ultimately, again, because the game results aren't predicated on real world, sporting outcomes, how are you scoring this? How is a user of the Griddy product, being ranked and rated and scored ultimately? Unpack that a little bit for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a proprietary system that we came up with. So it really is a one-of-one product that is unlike any mobile game or experience that you'll see out there. Of course, we got inspiration from a lot of different games, and you see across games like Madden, FIFA, Ultimate Team, Basketball GM, Football Manager, whatever it is. There's so many of these games that really focus on the element of building teams together and pairing the right players for an outcome. And what I really always noticed with, my experience growing up playing and loving these games is that what people liked more than actually playing the games themselves was the team building part of it. And so that's really where my focus lied. It's seeing like, hey, what are these aspects of games that people seem to really gravitate towards? And how can we strip away all of the extraneous stuff to create something that truly is that maximum level of accessibility where we turn it into this full video game and transform it into bite-sized entertainment. And, if you look at not only sports, but just like consumer entertainment in general, there's a huge push, this huge trend towards bite-sized entertainment, instant access, and that quick dopamine hit. And so, I'm trying to pair a lot of the passion that we have for football and the natural interest people have in team building and statistics and data, pairing it with that consumer trend that really is overarching throughout so many different places. You look at New York Times games, for example, with Wordle and connections, or LinkedIn games now is super popular. Reddit's making a push there. And, it really is because there's a huge demand, right? Like people want something that you can just pick up and play within those 2 minutes and be done with it.
You mentioned the fact you spent a number of years at Sleeper helping build their real money DFS product, but Griddy is free to play. There's no real money component to it, at least at this stage in the evolution of the product. Talk a bit about that decision, Brian. Based on your experience and everything you learned and all the insights you gleaned from your time at Sleeper, what pain points ultimately were you seeking to remove, both for the users when it comes to real money gaming and as well for you from a company building perspective? Obviously, there's all sorts of new layers of complexity that one needs to manage when you introduce a real money component. You've managed to avoid that. Just talk about like the decision making there and sort of the rationale in the game design.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a very intentional decision. And a core part of why I made that transition was to create that free to play experience. So to take it back to my time at Sleeper, I joined the company back in 2021 where there was no real money gaming on the platform at all. It was an entirely free to play product. And they brought me on to be one of really the core pieces of making that transition from a fantasy football app into more of that sports super app, with a core pillar of that being the daily fantasy product, the picks product. With that transition, you're building a lot of these systems from scratch, and, you really uncover a lot of the challenges that it presents. And as you mentioned, that's both for the business creating it and it's for the user. And I think we've all experienced that onboarding flow for a real money gaming app that frankly is very high friction, if not invasive. And for a lot of people that are trying out a new game or a new product that they don't know much about, it is quite a tall ask to be requesting their full name, their birthday, their home address, their social security number, asking them to link a payment method to even try out the product, right? And that's really high friction, right? And on the business side, that has a lot of implications for user acquisition, for onboarding, just your general ability to convert new users from somebody discovering the product into that daily active user. Even higher from a business standpoint, it can be highly restrictive and it can add a lot of operational overhead that is quite expensive and cumbersome to manage. And so for me, knowing what that entails, creating a real money gaming product, it was all the more motivation to say like, hey, we can build this free to play game that doesn't involve any sort of real money gaming, no cash prizes. And it will be a much more seamless, smooth, positive experience for those users. It'll open the game up to so many new people. And on the business side, it'll allow me to operate in a much more lean and cost-effective, cost-efficient way to get this thing off the ground without having to jump through all of those hoops of KYC and anti-money laundering and everything that comes with it, right? Because it really is a lot on a business, and I saw that firsthand. And shout out to Sleeper. I mean, like, I love those guys and gals more than anything. Like, I had an incredibly positive experience, but I wanted to do something pretty different than what Sleeper and a lot of the other players in the space are doing. And so that was so much of the motivation for the free to play angle. Beyond that, for the users, you look at what real money gaming does, it really starts to restrict your addressable market. It's saying, hey, who can play this game? You have to be a certain age, you have to live in a certain state, you have to have that socioeconomic situation where you have that extra cash to spend to play these games. And so, for me, like stripping back a lot of these layers and saying, hey, instead of, qualifying each user that comes in, we can make this a game that anyone can play. Like that was super, super important to me to build that type of experience.
So absent real money gaming functionality and mechanics in the product itself, talk a bit about the business model here. How are you monetizing and sort of what revenue levers are you looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. It's much more of a traditional mobile game approach than anything real money gaming, right? And so the core part of the business right now is in-app purchases. The game was initially designed to be a Wordle style game where people get 3 of these drafts a day and no more. And the intent there was to be like, hey, let's be 10 minutes slice out of your day that you play every single day, but don't need to sit around doing all day. And that was incredibly effective. It did a lot of amazing things for the business, just creating, frankly, some of that artificial scarcity to make people want to keep coming back. They ended every day itching and scratching for more drafts to the point where, people were loving the game, but they were very vocal. Hey, we want to play more. And so for me as the business, that made it pretty easy to launch monetization. About 8 months after we launched the free to play game, we turned on these in app purchases where users can buy draft tokens. They want to keep playing beyond their freebies each day. And so we've got, a lot of users who will do hundreds and hundreds of drafts a day and absolutely love it. And we also have, of course, a lot of users who play every day and will never have to spend a dollar. And for me, it's, again, making sure we're catering to both of those groups and making sure you have an incredible experience either way. But it really is those in-app purchases that are driving everything. And it makes it a lot easier on the business just being able to facilitate that all through Apple and Google directly rather than having to do a lot of the bolted on stuff that would be required for real money gaming.
Makes a ton of sense, Brian. And speaking of users, give us a little bit of sense of the traction you've seen so far, right? I don't know, speak to how many people are using it, kind of what engagement is looking like, and ultimately, like, what sort of feedback are you getting from the early adopters of the Griddy product?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, people absolutely love it, and that is by far the best part of my job is just seeing the messages every day about like what a highlight of the morning routine it is for our users. We've got about 30,000 people playing the app right now, over 3 million games played this year alone. And so, the average user in a month, they'll do 65 plus drafts, which is awesome, unbelievable. And when you start to really peel back the layers, you look at the retention metrics, they're absolutely top tier. And that's what I'm most proud of, right? Like that's the sign of a strong product and a product that is really worth building. It's, if they keep coming back and keep playing, you're really onto something. And for us, like over 50% of our new users are still playing the app a month later. And in the mobile gaming space, in the consumer app space, that's almost unheard of. And there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice retention and different lenses to look at it. But really, any way that you look at retention for Griddy, it's in the 99th percentile. And that is just an awesome foundation to be building an app and a business on, right? And that's so much of my focus from the start is just really building a game that does add a lot of joy and a lot of happiness to people's daily routines and something that they're excited to play. They're excited to tell their friends about. They think is different and fun, unique, and it's been a blast. Like it's all community first, and like I can get into that side, the Reddit, the Discord. Like I'm talking with these people every single day and figuring out how to improve the product. It's really a blast and the best part of my job.
I mean, I could tell just from hearing you talk, Brian, just the enthusiasm you have.
Yeah, you see the big smile once I start talking about the community. It's because I love them so much.
Look, I mean, 30,000 users is no joke, right? Especially for an early stage business, and especially for one that's really building, a casual mobile game, competing for that toilet time, as you alluded to, right? There's a lot of alternatives for people out there, whether it's Wordle, whether it's, the quick hit casual game. Talk a bit about how you've managed to acquire 30,000 users to this point. Is there any particular channels or tactics that have worked especially well for you? Share what you're willing to about the acquisition funnel.
Yeah, we're not really spending on marketing right now, which is a great thing. It's been almost all organic product-led growth up to this point. Reddit has been a huge outlet for us. And for me, I'm positioning the business as founder first and really telling my story and putting a face to the brand, talking about why I built Griddy, how I built it, and really just, I think, humanizing everything that I'm doing, building that connection with our users. A lot of people caught wind of that story just through some Reddit posts on different fantasy football subreddits, and they were really intrigued, excited to play it. And beyond that, once they do experience it, like as I mentioned, they say, hey, this is different, right? This is very new, drastically different from anything that I've played or seen in the space before. And with that, that makes them excited to talk about it. That makes them excited to send it to their group chat, send it with their friends, refer people. And so, it really has been almost all that word of mouth organic growth and just users really becoming megaphones for the brand and the app and excited to share it. And so for us, like that's an amazing start, right? Like you can growth hack your way to 30K, but there's really no way of knowing if that's going to stick around or if it's going to drop off a cliff. When it's that organic user-led growth, product-led growth, I mean, that's a great foundation where you'll see like, if we do absolutely nothing at all, that user base is still going to steadily grow. Those users are still going to stick around. They're still going to be playing every day. And so once we do start to turn on some of these growth channels, doing some paid acquisition, like this thing is just going to absolutely take off. And so that's largely the next step of the business is figuring out like, hey, we built such a strong foundation for the app and the community. They're really passionate about it. Now, how do we start to exponentially scale this? And so that's really the transition that we've made now that we feel that the product and the user base is in such a steady place.
Well, I would suggest 30,000 users is a pretty good indicator that you have found product market fit, which is always the elusive thing that most founders are chasing at the early stage. So kudos to you for getting to that point, Brian. Talking about your passionate user base, one of the 30,000 I happen to know is our mutual friend, Joel Simpkins from X Capital, who is one of your biggest cheerleaders. Every time I talked to Joel, I had a call with him last week. He was, second thing out of his mouth was Griddy. He is your ultimate hype man. But I do want to ask Brian a little bit about just the capital side of all of this, right? It's notoriously, expensive to build companies, and particularly competing in a category like you're competing in. Can you give us a little bit of sense of just the funding backgrounder and how you've been able to sort of capitalize the early stages of Griddy up until this point?
Yeah, so we're taking a little bit of a hybrid approach, threading the needle between like pure institutional capital and a full bootstrap. And so we did raise a relatively small round last summer as I was transitioning from Sleeper into Griddy. And that was from a lot of strategic angels, just people that I've met through my time within the space at Sleeper and beyond. And that's created a lot of cheerleaders, advocates, people who did put in money that allowed us to at least get the product built. Now we're at the point where monetization has exceeded our expectations. Cash flow is really strong. We're actually going to be profitable this month for the first time. And so the implications for the business there, really, it's just providing us a lot of that flexibility and leverage where, we're certainly considering going out, doing a capital raise, but it's not something we have to do. That's a position that you really want to be in as a founder. And that's a lot of the beauty of mobile gaming, right? Especially the free to play way that we built it. We have very low costs. We've got almost no variable costs associated with our revenue. The overhead is minimal. And the team right now, I mean, it's small but mighty, right? And I'm a huge believer in building very small teams of people that are exceptional and that have a high level of ownership rather than just scaling for the sake of scaling. And so it's really been a journey up to this point of just building a lot of that optionality and flexibility so that we can take the business in a number of different directions without feeling the need to go out and raise capital to survive, right? And, so much of that is because of like a lot of the awesome people in my corner. Like, shout out to Joel Simpkins. He has been incredible from the start, like both from the business and professional perspective and as a friend and as a power user. I mean, he's been like massively valuable. And there's a lot of other people like that, all the wonderful folks at Sleeper, the executives, the founders have been super supportive too. And so it really does take a village. Like as much as we do have a small team, there's a lot of people in Griddy's corner that are helping out in so many different ways. And so like to all those people, I have so much gratitude to the community who really has enabled us to grow the way we've grown and sustain the business the way we've sustained it with so little capital up front. I mean, it really is just, in my mind, such a blessing to be doing this with the people in the position that I'm in. And again, I'm very grateful for it all.
Right on, Brian. I want to talk a bit about just your time at Sleeper as well. Insofar as what you learned there through your experiences, it may have potentially set you up or positioned you for this next chapter, right? And look, taking a leap from a role at a company like Sleeper is a big risk in many different ways. And, you must have had some amount of confidence, and it sounds like you had that belief and buy-in from the team at Sleeper to, help feel a little bit more comfortable and confident in making the leap. But I guess, yeah, ultimately, Brian, like, were there any like learnings or experiences or things you saw from your time at Sleeper that have informed the way you're approaching building out Griddy?
Sleeper took an interesting angle to building their business where, I think a lot of people want to jump straight into monetization and really figuring out how they can start to drive revenue without going through the process of building a product that's worth using every day, creating a community that they have a real connection with, and really building that trust with people, right? And so I saw that firsthand. Like when I joined Sleeper in 2021, they had millions of monthly active users. They had this incredible fantasy platform, and they had so many things that they could have been doing to start to extract a lot of money out of that user base or start to monetize, but they hadn't done it. And that's not because they couldn't. That's because they really did want to build community first, product first, and create a stable foundation before they did transition into real money gaming. And so much of seeing their mentality and the way that they prioritize the product and the user base over everything really impacted my mindset and the way that I approached building the business at Griddy, right? And I told you, we went almost 8 months before even flipping on monetization at Griddy. When people were begging me, they were saying like, hey, please let me, give you money. we want more drafts. Like there were things that I could have been doing to monetize, but based on what I saw at Sleeper, I said, hey, as you build a product that people are playing every day, as you do create that connection with your power users, there's going to be plenty of ways that you can monetize that as you continue to grow and improve the product. And you've got to be very intentional about when you flip that switch, right? And so for me, it was like spending so much time creating that trust before turning on in-app purchases. And that really put us in a great spot once we did flip it on. And people did feel like, hey, we can trust Brian, we can trust Griddy. Like we know they're in this for the right reasons. And like we've got a lot of love and respect for the way that this product and really this entire app is being built. I think that's something that's very easy to say in theory, but once you get into the weeds, it is difficult to maintain that mindset. But just seeing the way that Wei Shi Ken, Henry Nam, like all of the amazing people over there, but seeing the way they did it, it really was so influential for me in building my own business and being able to prioritize the things that matter to me and matter to my users instead of, financial statements.
Look, at the very beginning of any entrepreneurial pursuit, we all have, our hopes as to how it will all go and how it will play out. We have some reasonable expectation as to how it might play out. But then once you start, there's always just the reality, which never quite reconciles with those hopes or expectations at the beginning. There's always a delta in between that expectation and reality. So for you, thus far on the Griddy journey, is there any sort of expectations you had at the beginning of it all that now that you're some ways into it is not exactly what you thought it would be? Is there any sort of anecdotes you can share around this expectation versus reality matrix?
I mean, things are going pretty well. Like I've been very happy with the progress that we've made. It's, the app is barely a year old and I'm incredibly proud of the progress that we've made. But of course, it's not going to be a linear journey. And I think that's just so important to keep in mind if you're a founder, really whatever you're doing in life, like as much as you always want to be going up and to the right and waking up every morning, having amazing days that go like you plan. So much of that founder's journey is going to be resilience. And I think that myself and a lot of people, when they are plotting out building a new company, building a new app, making one of those leaps, they're going to focus very heavily on the work experience, the skills, the technical background that's required to go from 0 to 1. And in the process, I think a lot of people just heavily underestimate the psychological factor that is required to do it, right? And really, like what it comes down to more than anything, it's that consistency, and that's the ability to get out of bed every morning and just keep pushing forward. And that's also something back to Sleeper that I learned from them. I'm like, man, like these guys and gals, they're waking up every single morning and they're putting in the work, and I watch them do it for 3-4 years straight, and that's what it takes. And I think that psychological resilience and that consistency is just such an underrated part of the journey of building something, right? Like it does take weeks and months and years of just stacking brick by brick by brick and continuing to make progress. And so, for me, I think that's really shifted my perspective of what it takes to build a business. And, I think it's a lot like athletes in that regard. Like basically any NBA player can go for 30 on any given night, but can you do it for 82 games in a season for a decade-long career? And, that's very much the way I think about my founder journey as well.
Yeah, well said. I'm a big fan of the expression that Rome wasn't built in a day, but they were laying bricks every hour, right? And I think that speaks to exactly the point you're just making, that, sounds like obviously it worked out well for Sleeper. Their success speaks for itself. It sounds like that same attitude and playbook, certainly has served you well through the first year of Griddy, Brian. Look, as you just said, app's barely been live for a year. So looking ahead to the next year, over the next 12 months, what are some of the major milestones that you're working towards? Or from a product perspective, maybe what are some of the major new features or functionalities that that are in the pipeline on the roadmap right now?
I'm so happy with where the core game loop is at. I think that drafting experience, building a team, whether it's in your solo ranked mode or playing against friends, is in a really great point where we've proven like people absolutely love it and they'll play it every day for many months and likely years in a row from everything we've seen. And so for me, now I'm transitioning over to, hey, what does that meta loop look like when we think about more long-term progression in the app? Starting to build in rewards, even if it is not real money gaming, cash prizes. How do we make sure that users feel like they have long-term progress that they're working towards and really feeling rewarded for the time and effort and sometimes money that they're putting into the app? And so that's a huge factor. It's just continuing to build on a lot of those game modes, features, cosmetics, rewards that I think are a key part of a lot of the best mobile gaming experiences. And there's a lot that I can learn from the mobile gaming industry. I think so much of my perspective is shaped by the fantasy football and real money gaming space. And I'm really building at the intersection of that sports mentality and a lot of the traditional mobile gaming. And so for me, I think the next evolution as a founder and frankly as a business is starting to take more of the learnings from traditional mobile gaming and start to infuse those with a lot of what we've already done with very much that sports mindset. And the overarching goal, it's always going to be bringing people together. It's always going to be community first, right? And so, like anything that I can do to make sure that your group chat that's usually only active in the fall is going all year round because you guys are playing Griddy every morning, you're competing in your league, you're talking about your scores, like that's always going to be my priority. It's bringing people together over this shared mutual passion of sports and games. And so for me, that really is a very exciting thing to do. And I've got a roadmap about a mile long of all the different games and features and improvements that I want to make to the app. And we're just going to keep knocking them out brick by brick and working towards that goal of, frankly, building the most user-friendly experience in sports, like something that anything or anyone can play and look forward to every morning.
And look, this is maybe an unfair question to ask the founder of an app that's barely a year old, but humor me here, Brian. Say you got a crystal ball in front of you, you're looking into it 5 years into the future from now, in your wildest dreams, where's Griddy at that time?
I don't know that it's my wildest dreams or anything like that, but I do think what really excites me about what we built is that because the app is not tied to any live games or stats, it's very much templatized in a way that we can copy and paste it from football into other sports. And, we're always getting requests for Griddy basketball, Griddy baseball, going international, doing it for soccer, something even like cricket, I think continues to open up our total addressable market and really expands the possibilities of what we can do and do so in a way that I think is actually minimal friction for the business. And if you want to even go beyond that, I just think there's so many different like IPs that have a lot of very passionate fans that don't have a way to consistently engage with, the shows, movies, universes that they love. And so for me, it really is blending this new trend of instant access, quick dopamine hit, bite-sized entertainment with IP and worlds that people love and giving them a consistent touch point. Like people think it's a silly example sometimes, but you even look at a show like The Bachelor or something along those lines of reality shows where, hey, there's a lot of really, really big fans of it, but they watch once a week. What do they do in the other 6 days a week? And so if we can build these experiences, these games that they can play every single day and consistently engage with, like that's something that they're going to love. And for the business side, like that's amazing for them to really expand the surface area of their IP and give them a lot more touch points to consistently engage their biggest fans. And so I do think that makes me very excited about the scale of what we're building and the potential to expand beyond football and into so many of these different consumer verticals with crazed fans like myself.
Right on, Brian. Gonna hit you with a few rapid fire questions before we get out of here today. First one is this. When you get up in the morning, check your phone. What's the first app you're opening up?
Oh, Griddy, of course. Got to do a couple of drafts in bed before we get the day going. And, it's a little bit of a brain exercise, so it gets you thinking. And I think there's a lot of people that have a similar routine. So I, of course, got to say Griddy.
I was going to say, that was a bit of a layup for you. I should have predicted that one. Let's try this one instead, Brian. If you're out later at the karaoke lounge, what song are you singing?
Oh boy. Country Roads has been a hit. I've had a couple of good nights, closed down a couple of bars with Country Roads, and my singing voice is pretty awful, but you get enough drinks and you build up the confidence to overcome it.
100%. All right, last one for you. If you could be anybody else for one day only, dead or alive, who would that be?
Oh boy. I told you I'm a diehard Bills fan. So, if I could spend a Sunday being Josh Allen, just hurdling guys and launching the ball 60 yards, I would take that in a second. So, fingers crossed, we'll see.
Well, it's good to be Josh Allen these days, to say the least. That's a very valid pick. Brian, for folks listening that want to get in touch with yourself, if anything's piqued their interest in terms of everything you've shared here today and or want to check out the Griddy product, more importantly, quickly plug the best way for them to do all of that.
Yeah, if you want to play Griddy, just go to the App Store, Google Play Store, search Griddy. You'll find it up top, Griddy Football Puzzles. And if anyone wants to get in contact with me, trusty old LinkedIn is always a good place to do it. So, I'm always fielding the connections and the DMs. Or you can shoot me an email, brian@griddy.cc. But, really any of these different outlets, I'll find a way to get back to you.
Right on, Brian. Well, look, it's been a lot of fun to learn more about Griddy, and the way you're building it is really quite unique in terms of just, the mechanics, the way you're thinking about it, the way you're approaching it. So it's been a lot of fun. And to say the least, wishing you and your team all the best as you go forward here. I feel like in a couple of years when I look back now, I'll be able to say I knew him back when. Griddy feels like it's on the cusp of popping off here. So wishing you all the best as you move forward with it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. It's been a blast.
The Betting Startups podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 4 out of the top 5 US operators personalize player experiences with Optimove. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/bettingstartups. And if you like what you see, you'll get your first month free.